Klein wakes up in a strange room with blood on his hands, a gun on the table, and a hole in his head. He's completely confused. As vague memories begin to flash through his mind, the hole in his head starts to regenerate. He remembers his past life as Joe Mingru on Earth, but now he also holds the memories of another man, Klein Moretti. From what he can piece together, he's now in Klein Moretti's body, a jobless history graduate living in the city of Tingen. Hoping for answers, Klein checks the man's journal and discovers that a month ago, Klein met with someone named Welsh McGovern, and together they began decoding an ancient book that belonged to the Antigonus family. Though Klein doesn't know much about them, he senses they are significant. The journal is filled with cryptic phrases like Black Emperor and Tudor Kingdom, but then the entries stop abruptly. That, combined with the presence of the gun, paints a grim picture. Just then, the journal flips open on its own, revealing a chilling final entry. Everyone is going to die, including me. This convinces Klein that the original man must have discovered a terrifying secret that led to his death. Before he can think further, Klein's little sister, Melissa Moretti, knocks on the door. He can't let her see the blood-soaked room, so he quickly shuts the journal and starts cleaning. When Melissa enters, she's confused by the mess, books stacked everywhere, and asks if he stayed up reading all night. Klein lies, saying he was just organizing. He tries to hide the gun in a drawer, but he does it clumsily, making a loud thud. Melissa hears it and asks what the noise was. Panicking, Klein pulls out a broken pocket watch as a cover. Silently, Melissa takes it and begins fixing it for him. Despite her cold demeanor, her small gesture shows she still cares. After she leaves, Klein finishes wiping away the blood. Though his memories remain scattered, it's clear that the ancient notebook is connected to everything. But now he wonders, how did he even end up in this world? In his former life, Joe Mingru was just an ordinary man, struggling and dissatisfied. One day, fed up with everything, he performed a luck ritual he found online to try and change his fate. Somehow, it worked and transported him into this new body and world. A few minutes later, Melissa, now dressed for school, gives him a plate of bread and reminds him to buy more from the bakery. She also promises to make a special meal for him that evening, knowing he's been trying to find a job. But Klein doesn't plan on staying long. He wants to perform the ritual again, hoping it might send him back to his original world. For now, he heads to the bakery. While shopping, he gets a strange feeling, as if someone is watching him. After buying the bread, he walks through the city, which appears normal, aside from the eerie, blood-red moon that appears at night. Along the way, he spots some men playing the card game Landlord, something that also existed on Earth. History books here say the game was invented by Rosel Gustav 100 years ago. Not only that, but Gustav is credited with inventing tarot reading, steam engines, and even sailboats, massively advancing this world's technology. Realizing all this, Klein concludes, Rosel Gustav might have been a transmigrator too, just like him. At first, Klein feels a bit relieved. If Rosel Gustav was also a transmigrator, then he might not be alone in this world. But that relief doesn't last. Suddenly, he's startled by a creepy clown and instinctively reaches for his gun. To be fair, the clown is unsettling, so his reaction is understandable. However, that strange feeling of being watched creeps in again, prompting Klein to quickly walk away. Convinced he's being followed, Klein ducks into a nearby tent to lose his pursuer. As it turns out, the tent belongs to a fortune teller. Since he's her first customer of the day, she offers a free tarot reading. Intrigued, Klein agrees and asks her to reveal his past, present, and future. When asked which he'd like to see first, he chooses the present. The card she flips over is the Fool, the Zero card, symbolizing new beginnings. But before she can explain, Klein senses the follower getting closer, so he quickly leaves the tent. Moments later, a man walks in asking for Klein, but by then, he's already gone. Later that day, Klein returns home, ready to attempt the luck enhancement ritual once more, hoping it might send him back to his original world. He prepares talismans and wraps them around pieces of bread, placing them in the four corners of the room. Then, he begins the ritual by chanting Celestial Worthy 4 times. At first, nothing happens, but suddenly, he's overwhelmed by a splitting headache, as if his body is being torn apart. When the pain subsides, Klein finds himself floating in a strange void, filled with swirling red and blue lights. The lights converge and suddenly summon 2 strangers, a young woman named Audrey Hall and a man named Alger Wilson. Both are confused, but from their perspective, Klein appears almost godlike. Audrey politely asks if this divine realm belongs to him. Klein is clueless, but the moment he thinks about a shrine, one forms from the surrounding gray fog. It seems that he has control over this realm, specifically over the mysterious gray fog. Alger then asks Klein who he is. It's a simple question, but Klein hasn't had time to truly reflect. Is he still Joe Mingru, or has he fully become Klein Moretti? After a moment of thought, he decides to embrace a new identity and introduces himself as the Fool. Alger asks if there's a reason they were summoned. Though the summoning was accidental, Klein plays along with his new persona and says it was an experiment. Neither of them questions it. Curious, Audrey asks if they may leave now since he doesn't seem to need anything from them. Klein reassures her that they are free to go, and she seems to enjoy the mysterious experience. She then asks Klein how to become a Beyonder. He has no idea what that means, but can't admit that, so he tells her to ask Alger instead. Alger, still wary of Klein, is amazed that Audrey, who sounds like a noble from Backland, and he himself, who was far out at sea, were both summoned here, something that would take tremendous power. Putting that aside, he explains that people can become Beyonders by joining the Church of the Evernight Goddess or other similar churches. Though it's rare to rise to that level, it is possible. Audrey appreciates the info, but doesn't want to lose her freedom by joining a church. She asks if there's another way. In response, Alger reveals he has 2 sequence 9 potions, something that shocks Audrey because of their rarity and surprises Klein because he doesn't even know what they are. When Audrey asks which potions he has, Alger replies, the sailor and the audience. The latter grants keen perception and observation skills. They soon reach an agreement, and Audrey asks Klein to act as a witness to their pact. He accepts. Before they leave, Audrey makes one final request. She asks if Klein can host more gatherings like this. Alger agrees, now viewing Klein as a powerful benefactor worth following. Klein hesitates to agree to the meeting request. The more he interacts with the others, the higher the chance they'll realize he's not truly powerful. Still, he needs information about the mystical realm, so he agrees and tells them their gatherings will be held every Monday at 3 p.m. With that settled, Audrey suggests they use code names instead of their real names. Since Klein had named himself the Fool, Audrey chooses Justice, and Alger decides to go by the Hanged Man. Suddenly, in the real world, there's a knock on Klein's door. The noise breaks his concentration, and he struggles to keep the gray fog realm stable. Forced to end the gathering, he dismisses everyone and returns to his body. Back in reality, Klein quickly hides his blood-stained journal and shoves the gun into the stove. When he peeks through the keyhole, he sees an inspector at the door. He ruffles his hair and pretends to have just woken from a nap before answering. The man introduces himself as Leonard Mitchell, an officer from the Nighthawks, and barges in without waiting. He's accompanied by his partner Dunn Smith. They question Klein about Welsh McGovern and Naya, who were both found dead from apparent suicides the previous day, the same day Klein shot himself. Of course, he can't exactly admit that. Trying to play dumb, Klein claims he doesn't remember anything. But Leonard has already found his journal, and its final entry, "Everyone will die," clearly raises suspicion. Leonard demands to know what it means, but Klein simply says he doesn't remember. Dunn then informs Klein that they have evidence placing him at the McGovern Manor, and that a gun went missing that night. When asked about it, Klein admits he hid the gun in the stove. Since he's already telling the truth, he goes on to explain that he woke up this morning after surviving a suicide attempt, but his memory of the event is mostly gone. Naturally, he leaves out the fact that he's a transmigrator. Strangely, Dunn believes him. The story matches his own deductions. Still, protocol requires confirmation, so they decide to take Klein to a psychic for verification. Klein panics at the idea that his memories from Earth might be discovered, but he has no choice. As they escort him to a carriage, Dunn briefly gets distracted by a child. Klein uses the opportunity to flee through a back alley. He runs as fast as he can, but suddenly, time freezes and the world around him begins to float. Realizing a Beyonder is nearby, Klein tries to escape in another direction, but the road itself rises to block him. The entire terrain shifts to trap him. Just in time, Klein squeezes through a narrow gap and reaches the main road. He jumps into the first carriage he sees and tells the driver to take him to the port. The carriage moves, and for a moment, he thinks he's safe, until he realizes the driver is none other than Dunn Smith. Klein wakes up again, this time at his desk, and hears his door creak open. At the end of the hallway, Dunn stands silently. The eerie atmosphere confirms for Klein that Dunn is likely a Beyonder. But he's not alone. A woman suddenly grabs Klein's head, pulling his consciousness into a dreamscape. This woman begins probing Klein's mind, searching for memories. Thankfully, the gray fog protects his memories of Earth, keeping his secrets safe. Still, she continues looking for clues about what happened the night before. She asks Klein what happened with the Antigonus notebook, but he genuinely doesn't know. Then she asks what he was doing when Welsh died. Her powers force Klein to reenact that moment, and he ends up shooting himself in the head once more, just as it happened. He snaps back into the hallway as the woman leaves his mind. She informs Dunn that Klein is telling the truth. He really did attempt suicide, and she found no memory of anything prior to that. However, the Antigonus notebook is still missing, and Klein remains vulnerable. Recognizing this, Dunn offers Klein a chance to join their organization, the Nighthawks, and become a Beyonder himself. The next day, Klein walks down the street, holding a card for a tavern in the city. He remembers Dunn's instructions. If you want to join us, go find someone named right at the Hound Tavern. Thinking that joining Dunn's Nighthawks would be good cover, Klein heads there. Inside, the tavern is chaotic, full of straw betting, rough men, and brawling. Klein looks completely out of place, almost baby-faced compared to the others. One man nearly picks a fight with him, but Klein avoids it and finds Wright, who isn't too happy to see him. When Klein explains that Dunn sent him, Wright simply says, "Follow me," and leads him into an elevator that descends into the secret underground base of the Blackthorn Security Company. There, Klein meets Roseanne, the sleepy receptionist, who tells him she's been expecting him. She leads him downstairs, where they briefly meet a quiet girl named Royale, a strange man named Fry, who's experimenting on humans, and another man named Kenley. Eventually, Roseanne stops in front of a large door and asks Klein to go in alone. She's too scared of the captain, despite saying he's actually kind. Klein enters and finds Dunn waiting inside. Dunn hands him the official paperwork for joining Team 7, explaining that this is just one of many hidden bases used by their supernatural division. Klein is happy to join, but Dunn warns him that becoming a Beyonder carries serious risks, including losing control of oneself. He asks Klein to take a candle and follow him. They enter a solemn chamber filled with graves, resting places for former Nighthawks who lost control of their powers. Dunn explains that these tombs serve as a reminder of what lies ahead. As they talk, Dunn explains the 4 Beyonder paths available through the church. Path of complete insomnia, path of the corpse collector, path of the mysterious intruder, path of the seer. Klein is told to carefully consider his choice and speak with the alchemist, Neil, for guidance. Later, Klein finds Neil's lab. The room seems empty until it suddenly explodes and Neil appears out of the smoke. Klein introduces himself, but Neil already knows him, having been informed by Dunn. Neil invites Klein to help clean up, and as they work, he tells Klein about his studies and experiences. When Klein humbly downplays himself, Neil encourages him to start small, learn gradually, and eventually master things like code breaking. To Klein's surprise, Neil then pulls out a diary written by Emperor Roselle. These diaries are legendary and believed to hold immense power, yet have been indecipherable for over 150 years. Neil says he managed to decode small parts, but Klein is shocked to realize they're written in Chinese, his native language from his past life. Reading them is easy for him, and he begins absorbing secrets from the Emperor's life. However, he keeps this ability hidden, pretending he understands very little to protect his true identity. Inspired by the diary, Klein decides to walk the path of the seer, believing it aligns with the legacy of the Emperor and perhaps his own destiny. Neil is stunned by the choice, warning Klein that once he takes the potion, there's no turning back. But Klein is confident. So, Neil begins preparing the potion. The ingredients are strange and unsettling. When finished, the potion even explodes and smells awful. Neil teases Klein, but then advises him to drink it quickly, without hesitation. Klein steels himself and drinks the potion. Its effects hit immediately, energy surges through his veins. Neil tells him to visualize something that exists in this world. Klein succeeds. Next, Neil tells him to imagine something that doesn't exist in this world. When Klein visualizes a rocket from his previous life, chaos erupts, weather shifts, explosions occur, and the terrain bends. Neil urges him to stay focused. Klein, now standing atop the imagined rocket, eventually imagines a spacesuit, causing the surroundings to collapse. Neil calms him down, and finally, Klein stabilizes. His eyes change color, signaling that he has successfully become a seer. Neil congratulates him, saying he has great potential. Klein now sees Neil's spirit and learns he can perceive others' physical conditions through this new power. However, he's shocked to also see two massive eyes above Neil. When he points it out, Neil dismisses it as possibly just a weather phenomenon. But Klein notices someone or something disappearing in the background. Drained, Klein is advised not to overuse his powers, as it could lead to illusions or even collapse. Neil tells him how Leonard once fainted from overuse. To deactivate the ability, Klein is instructed to tap between his eyebrows twice. He tries it, and his eyes return to normal. Neil offers a few more tips on how to use the seer powers efficiently. Before Klein leaves, he's told to pick up his gear, a pistol and special demon-slaying bullets. He's also reminded to ask Dunn for his monthly allowance. With that, Klein leaves, tired but happy. Klein went to see Dunn, who offered him more advice. He reminded Klein that, with power and uniqueness comes risk, and warned him to avoid meddling in matters that didn't concern him. Dunn then told him his salary would be £3 per week and handed him £12 in advance. Overjoyed, Klein felt like he had finally escaped poverty. Excited, Klein bought a new cane and clothes and began wandering around the city. While walking, a carriage pulled up beside him, and someone inside ordered him to get in. It was Leonard. Inside the carriage, Leonard handed him a photo of a boy named Elliot, the son of a wealthy merchant. The boy had been kidnapped earlier that morning, and they needed to investigate. Klein was confused. They were supposed to deal with Beyonders, not kidnappings. But Leonard explained they were undercover at a security company, and the boy's father was a regular client. He assured Klein it would be easy for a seer and handed him the boy's clothes to track. Using his powers and a dowsing rod, Klein activated his abilities. The moon turned red, and the dowsing rod revealed Elliot's path. Strangely, those ominous eyes from before appeared again, watching every step. Following the rod's direction, Klein guided the carriage through the city until they arrived at a strange abandoned house on Fourstone Street. Inside, they climbed the stairs, and the rod pointed them to the exact room. Klein activated his spirit vision and saw two kidnappers and the child. Leonard praised him. "Well done, it'll be over now." But Klein was exhausted, wondering if he was overusing his powers. Leonard then burst into the room, quickly taking out one kidnapper and beating the second. At that moment, a dark feather appeared in the air, and both men felt a sinister energy. The kidnappers began transforming into a grotesque Beyonder monster. Excited by the challenge, Leonard engaged the creature. The monster couldn't land a hit on him, and when it tried to escape, Klein followed carefully to avoid an ambush. Suddenly, the creature appeared beside Klein, who fired his gun despite trembling. The monster flew upward, but suddenly fell. Leonard had used his powers to enter its world, bind it, and eliminate it. With the child saved, the two felt relief. But once again, Klein saw the eyes watching him. When Leonard asked what was wrong, Klein said nothing. Once Leonard left, Klein muttered that the original Klein had visited this place before. Later, they returned Elliot to his father. Leonard began investigating how the kidnappers obtained the Beyonder potion that turned them into monsters. He joked with Klein, saying it was rare for beginners to face monsters like this, and added, "Anyway, I'm happy to work with you." Klein was surprised, but shook his hand. Leonard mentioned he felt something drawing him toward Klein, and Klein admitted, "Me too." After Klein left, Leonard was seen speaking to someone in the shadows. Meanwhile, Klein, now excited to tell his sister about his new job, arrived home, but something was off. The house had changed. Sensing a Beyonder's presence, he tried to flee. He found a door and entered. Inside, Klein's diary was flipping its pages by itself until it stopped on the line, "Everyone will die, including me." Suddenly, the Fool Tarot card appeared, and the space around him transformed. Klein awoke, terrified. He now believed the house across from the kidnapping site might hold clues to the Antigonus family's notebook. Elsewhere, a man wandered the streets until he arrived at Klein's home. The door opened on its own. It was revealed that this man was Benson, Klein's older brother. Seeing how poor the living conditions were made him emotional. He began to cry. That evening, the family sat at the dinner table. This time, Klein was the one cooking. The delicious aroma surprised both Benson and Melissa. She even asked if this was really Klein's first time cooking. Once they tasted it, they were shocked by how good it was. Benson then gave Klein a gift, a stylish suit. At first, Klein protested, saying it must have been expensive. But Melissa explained that Benson had been saving for a long time. When Klein tried it on, it fit perfectly. The two siblings were amazed. Grateful, Klein thanked them. For a brief moment, he remembered their parents. But Benson simply smiled and said, "We're family. You don't need to thank us."